Grace Mitchell had always been a creature of habit. She'd spent the last 2 years working as a waitress at a cozy café in the heart of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and it paid the bills. And, as she'd often tell her friends, it gave her the freedom to pursue her real passion, art. But tonight was different. Grace had agreed to go on a blind date. Her friend Clara had insisted it was time for Grace to stop hiding behind her art supplies and start living. So, she reluctantly agreed, only with the assurance that if the date went poorly, she could bail early. When she entered the small, dimly lit restaurant, her stomach churned with nervous energy. The hostess greeted her warmly and led her to a table in the corner. "Your date should be here any minute," the hostess said with a smile. "Enjoy your meal while you wait." Grace forced a smile, nodding politely as she took her seat. The table was quaint, set for two, with a flickering candle casting soft shadows across the white linen tablecloth. She glanced at the menu, but she wasn't really hungry. She couldn't focus on food when her mind was occupied with thoughts of what was to come. A few minutes passed, and still no sign of her date. Grace checked her phone to see a message from Clara. "He'll be there soon, don't worry." But Grace wasn't worried. At least, not yet. She was just unsure. Then, she heard footsteps. A man in a crisp suit appeared in the doorway of the restaurant, his eyes scanning the room. He walked confidently to the table, and Grace's heart skipped a beat. "Grace?" he asked, his voice smooth and warm. She stood up, ready to greet him, but something felt off. His smile was genuine, but it was a little too charming. Still, she shook off her doubts and extended her hand. "Yes, I'm Grace. You must be Ryan." The man took her hand, but before he could respond, the waiter appeared at her side, glancing between the two of them. "Is this your date, miss?" he asked. Grace nodded, still a bit unsure. She was about to sit down when the man across from her spoke again. "I'm sorry, but I believe I'm at the wrong table," he said, his smile faltering. Confused, Grace looked up at him. "What do you mean? You're Ryan, right?" The man blinked, clearly surprised. "No, my name is Liam Scott." It was then that Grace's stomach twisted. She had misheard the reservation. This was not her date. Liam looked at her with a mix of curiosity and amusement, and Grace couldn't help but laugh awkwardly. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were, well, never mind. I think I'm at the wrong table." Liam chuckled softly. "No worries. It happens. Maybe I could sit with you for a moment while you wait for your date." Grace hesitated. She had no reason to stay, but something about Liam's demeanor made her reconsider. He wasn't rude or upset by her mistake, and his easygoing nature put her at ease. Besides, it had been a while since she'd had an interesting conversation. "Well, I suppose one drink wouldn't hurt," she said with a shrug, smiling. The conversation started off with small talk, what kind of work Grace did, how long she'd been in the city, and her favorite places to eat. But as the minutes passed, Grace found herself growing more comfortable. Liam wasn't the typical person she expected to meet on a blind date. He wasn't trying too hard to impress, nor did he seem to have an agenda. "I think this is the first time I've had a conversation that wasn't interrupted by my phone," Liam remarked, taking a sip of his wine. Grace smiled, setting her drink down. "It's rare, right? Everything's so fast-paced now, sometimes it feels impossible to just be." Liam nodded. "I know exactly what you mean. People are always distracted by technology, but sometimes it's the simple moments that matter the most." They both fell into a comfortable silence for a moment, and Grace found herself genuinely enjoying his company. He wasn't just another guy trying to impress her with his achievements or pretend to be someone he wasn't. He was real. "So, what about you?" Liam asked, leaning in slightly. "What do you do outside of the restaurant?" Grace hesitated for a moment. She wasn't embarrassed by her job as a waitress, but she always felt like it wasn't exactly glamorous. Still, she decided to be honest. "I'm an artist," she said. "I work here to pay the bills, but my real passion is painting." Liam's eyes lit up. "That's incredible. What kind of art do you do?" She paused for a moment, unsure whether to go into detail. But there was something about Liam's genuine interest that made her want to share more. "I mainly do abstract pieces. I love using colors and shapes to express emotions. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's calm, but it's always personal." "That sounds amazing," Liam said, his voice filled with admiration. "I'd love to see your work someday." Grace was taken aback. Most people weren't that interested in her art, let alone willing to make such an offer. "Really?" she asked, feeling a flutter in her chest. "Absolutely," Liam replied with a smile. Maybe we can go to an art gallery sometime? I'm sure there's one in the city that's perfect for someone with your taste. Grace felt a warmth spread through her. Maybe this wasn't such a disaster after all. It was a pleasant evening, and even though it had started with a mix-up, she was beginning to enjoy Liam's company more than she'd ever anticipated. As the evening wore on, Grace and Liam continued to talk, delving into deeper topics, life, dreams, and their hopes for the future. But just as she was beginning to feel comfortable, Liam dropped a bombshell. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you're an artist, huh? I think that's amazing. You know, I've been trying to support more local artists lately. I've been involved in a few startup projects that focus on art and creativity. It's been exciting." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Wait, what? You're involved in startups?" Liam nodded, seemingly unfazed. "Yeah. I'm actually the founder of a tech company. We focus on creating innovative software solutions for the creative industry." Grace's heart skipped a beat. "Wait a minute. You're a tech millionaire?" Liam's eyes twinkled, though he looked a little hesitant. "I suppose you could put it that way, but I don't like to talk about it much. It's not who I am." Grace's mind was racing. She had been talking to a tech millionaire this whole time? She couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and confusion. Was this all some kind of setup? Grace sat back, stunned. Her mind raced as she processed the information. Just a moment ago, she had been laughing with Liam, enjoying their conversation, and feeling the warmth of a connection she hadn't felt in a long time. But now, it felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. Liam, the man who seemed so genuine and kind, wasn't the person she thought he was. He was a millionaire, a tech mogul, to be precise. In the span of just a few words, her world shifted. She had been led to believe that they were on equal footing, that they were just two people meeting under the same circumstances, without pretenses or hidden agendas. But that wasn't true, was it? She could feel the tension rising in her chest, her breath growing shallow as her emotions swirled between surprise, confusion, and anger. She wasn't sure which one to settle on first. I didn't realize you were so." Grace struggled to find the right words, her voice catching in her throat. "You never mentioned it." Liam, looking slightly uncomfortable but not defensive, met her eyes. "I know. And I should have told you. But I didn't want you to think I was just another guy trying to impress you with my wealth." Grace stared at him, her mind clouded with a mix of disbelief and frustration. It wasn't about the money. It was about the deception. He had sat there with her for what felt like hours, getting to know her, laughing with her, talking about their dreams, their passions, their lives. But through it all, he had never once mentioned who he really was. He had kept that part of himself hidden, as if it was something to be ashamed of, or worse, something he wanted to use as a tool to manipulate her. "Why didn't you just tell me from the start?" she asked, her voice rising with the frustration she could no longer suppress. "Why keep that from me? All this time, I thought we were connecting, but now it feels like everything was a lie." Liam looked pained, his shoulders tense as if her words had struck him deeper than he expected. "Grace, I wasn't trying to hide who I am, I just didn't want it to be the focus of our connection. I didn't want you to see me as just some guy with money. I wanted you to see me as Liam, the guy who loves art, the guy who loves good conversation." Grace's heart pounded, but there was an edge of bitterness in her words when she responded. "But you're not just Liam, the guy who loves art. You're Liam, the millionaire tech entrepreneur who hides behind a facade. That's who you really are. You don't think that matters?" Liam flinched, and Grace immediately regretted the harshness of her words. But they had been sitting there, talking for hours, and he had never mentioned it. He had never once referred to his work, his career, his position in the world. Instead, he had allowed her to believe that they were equals. Now, she couldn't help but feel foolish. She had let herself believe in the connection they shared, but it had been based on half-truths. She was angry at him for not being upfront, but she was equally angry at herself for not seeing through it sooner. "I'm sorry," Liam said quietly, his voice a mix of guilt and regret. "I should have told you the truth. I see now that I've made a mistake." Grace looked away, her hands clutching the edge of the table. She needed space, needed distance from the swirl of emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her. The air between them felt heavy, laden with unspoken words. She couldn't look at him, not right now. "Maybe I should go," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. Liam stood up immediately, his face earnest and pleading. "No. Please, don't leave. Just let me explain. I didn't want this to ruin everything. I want you to understand why I did what I did." Grace shook her head, her mind too clouded to hear his explanations. "I don't know if I can trust you now," she whispered. The words left her lips before she could stop them, but they were true. She felt betrayed, not just by the omission of who he was, but by the fact that he had let her believe in something that wasn't entirely real. "I understand," Liam said, taking a step back. He seemed to be struggling, as if weighing whether or not to push further. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I get it, Grace. I should have been honest from the start. But the last thing I wanted was for you to think I was only interested in you because of my money. I wanted to know you. Not the version of you that might be impressed by what I have, but the real you." Grace swallowed hard. His words were sincere, she could see that in the way his eyes pleaded for understanding. But how could she reconcile the image of the man she had been speaking to, the man who had listened to her talk about her art, about her hopes for the future, with the reality of who he was? "Everything just feels so off now," Grace said, her voice quiet, almost as though she was talking to herself. "I don't know what's real anymore." Liam reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small card and sliding it across the table toward her. "If you decide you want to talk, if you want to know the real me, my work, my life, everything, I'm here. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. But I won't pressure you, either." Grace stared at the card for a long moment, her heart conflicted. He had been honest in this moment, but was it too little, too late? He had put himself in a position where she felt deceived, and no matter how genuine his apology, that hurt couldn't be easily erased. "I need some time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't think straight right now. I just need time." Liam nodded solemnly, his face falling slightly as he stepped back. "I understand. I won't call you, and I won't press you. But just know that I'm truly sorry, Grace. I never wanted to hurt you." With that, Grace stood up from the table, her legs shaky as she walked toward the exit. The restaurant felt suffocating now, the noise of the people around her muted as her thoughts swirled in her mind. She could still hear Liam's voice in the back of her head, but the sting of his revelation was too much for her to process in one go. She stepped outside into the cool night air, hoping the walk would clear her mind, but the only thing she felt was a deep sense of loss. She hadn't just lost a date, she had lost trust, something she wasn't sure she could ever rebuild. The days that followed felt like a blur to Grace. She had spent the past few days processing what had happened between her and Liam. Her emotions were still raw, swinging between anger, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. She hadn't reached out to him, and he hadn't tried to contact her again. He had kept his word, giving her the space she had asked for. And though that was what she needed, part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she had let something important slip through her finger. She couldn't deny the connection she had felt with Liam, the way he had made her laugh, the way he had seemed to understand her in a way no one else had. She had been so swept up in the moment, so drawn to him, that it was hard for her to fully process how this revelation about his wealth had changed everything. Yet, even as she tried to convince herself to move on, her thoughts always returned to Liam. His apology had been sincere. He had never tried to make excuses, never once blamed her for the situation. He had simply expressed his regret and asked for another chance, but Grace wasn't sure if she was ready to give him one. A week later, Grace was sitting in her small apartment, sipping her morning coffee when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, surprised to see a message from Liam. "I understand if you need more time. But I miss talking to you. If you're open to it, I'd love to meet and talk. No pressure, just us." Her heart skipped a beat. The message was simple, yet the sincerity in his words struck her deeply. She felt a pull, a longing to hear him out, to see if what they had was still worth exploring. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to face the hurt again. She sat there for a moment, weighing her options. She could ignore it and move on, or she could give him a chance to explain further. After a long pause, she typed a reply. "Okay. Let's meet. But I need to be honest with you, I'm still processing everything." She hit send and set the phone down, trying not to think too much about it. She wasn't sure where this conversation would lead, but something about Liam's persistence made her feel that maybe it was worth trying again. They agreed to meet at a quiet café, one that was away from the noise of the city and close to her apartment. When Grace arrived, she spotted Liam right away. He was sitting at a corner table, his hands clasped together on the table in front of him, his expression serious but warm. As soon as he saw her, he stood up, a tentative smile on his face. "Hey," he said softly. "Thank you for meeting me." Grace nodded, offering a small smile of her own. She felt a little awkward, but at the same time, there was a sense of familiarity between them. She took a seat across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm not sure where to start, she said, her voice slightly shaky. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened. And I can't deny that I'm still hurt, Liam. You really blindsided me with all of this. I thought we were connecting, and now it feels like I've been living in a fantasy. Liam nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I know, Grace. And I'm sorry. I should have told you from the start. But I was afraid that if I did, you wouldn't see me the same way. I was afraid you'd only be interested in me because of my wealth, and I didn't want that. Grace took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But you didn't trust me enough to tell me. I get it, you were trying to protect yourself, but it feels like you were hiding something important. I thought I knew you, Liam, but now I don't know who you really are. Liam's expression softened. I'm the same person I was when we first met. I promise you. I've just made some bad choices in how I presented myself, and I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately, but I want the chance to show you who I really am. Not the businessman, not the millionaire. Just Liam. Grace's heart wavered. She had always believed in the power of second chances, but this was different. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open herself up again, to trust him with her heart after everything that had happened. She needed more time, more reassurance. I need to see it for myself, Liam. I need to know that what you say is true, that you want to be with me for who I am, not what I can give you, she said, her voice steady but vulnerable. Liam's eyes locked onto hers, and she could see the sincerity in them. I'm not here to impress you, Grace. I just want to be with you. And I want to prove to you that I can be the person you need me to be. There was a long silence between them, and for the first time in a while, Grace felt a sense of peace. She wasn't ready to fully forgive him just yet, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them to rebuild what had been broken. I think we should take it slow, she said, her voice calm but firm. No expectations. Just us, getting to know each other again. Liam smiled, relief washing over his face. I'm okay with that. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm serious about us. They spent the next hour talking about everything, about their hopes, their dreams, their lives beyond the surface. Liam opened up about his work, about the pressures of living in the tech world, and how hard it had been for him to find someone who saw beyond his wealth. Grace shared her thoughts on art, her passion for painting, and the fears she had about opening her own gallery. They talked not as strangers, but as two people who had both made mistakes and were willing to work through them. When they parted that day, Grace felt something inside her shift. There were still doubts in her heart, but there was also a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could make this work after all. Maybe, just maybe, Liam had earned the second chance he was asking for. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's heart slowly began to heal. She still thought about the night she had learned the truth about Liam, the pain of feeling deceived and hurt. But she also found herself remembering the laughter, the conversations, the warmth they had shared, the way he had made her feel understood in a way no one ever had before. She was still uncertain, still cautious, but as she met him again and again, she saw the man behind the successful, polished tech millionaire. Liam was no longer the mysterious stranger who had kept secrets from her. Instead, he had become someone who had shown her a different side of himself, his genuine self, and it was this version of him that she was beginning to trust. They started meeting at quieter spots, cafes, small parks, and even galleries that Grace often frequented for inspiration. There were no grand gestures or sweeping declarations of love. Instead, there was a simple, steady rhythm to their relationship. They talked, shared their lives, and took things slowly. Liam never once rushed her, never once pushed her for more than she was ready to give. He understood that rebuilding trust took time. One afternoon, after a long week of work and a few tense days of self-reflection, Emma invited Liam to her favorite little art gallery, a hidden gem she'd discovered a few months ago. It wasn't anything extravagant, but there was something comforting about it. It was quiet, intimate, and a place where Emma could fully immerse herself in her passion for art without the world intruding. She wanted to share it with him. To show him the world where she felt most herself, a part of her life that had been untouched by their complicated history. Liam was there on time, his presence always calm and steady, like the gentle pressure of a hand on her back. As they walked through the exhibits, Emma felt a strange sense of peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. She found herself laughing at his comments about the abstract paintings, making fun of their odd shapes and bold colors, and he didn't seem to mind when she insisted that the one painting that was just splashes of blue was, in fact, a representation of the ocean's hidden beauty. I never understood art like this, Liam said with a small laugh, stopping in front of a particularly eccentric piece. But I can see why it's meaningful to you. Emma smiled, feeling the tension between them ease. It's not about understanding everything, you know? It's about feeling it. Sometimes, things don't need to make sense. They just need to exist. They paused in front of a large canvas covered in soft, muted hues, blue, green, and purple intertwined in swirling patterns. This one reminds me of the way I felt when we first met, Emma said softly. Everything was chaotic, unpredictable, but there was beauty in it. I was so sure of something that wasn't true. I trusted you, and I got hurt. Liam stood beside her, his eyes trained on the painting, but his voice soft as he spoke. I know. And I hate that I made you feel that way. I hate that I lied, even if my intentions were never to hurt you. Grace turned to him, her heart aching. The past few weeks had shown her a different side of Liam, his vulnerability, his honesty, and his commitment to proving himself. She had started to understand why he had kept his wealth a secret. He had been afraid, just as she had been, of being judged or misunderstood. But despite all the confusion, she still couldn't deny the connection they shared. And maybe, just maybe, that connection could overcome the hurt. I'm not saying I've forgiven you completely, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm starting to see that it wasn't about you lying to me. It was about me believing in something that wasn't real. And now I have to figure out how to rebuild that trust, not just in you, but in myself. Liam looked at her, his expression full of sincerity. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that you can trust me again. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to wait, as long as it takes. Emma's heart swelled with a mix of emotions. She had been scared of being hurt again, scared of giving Liam another chance, but at this moment, as they stood side by side in the quiet gallery, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt in weeks. She wasn't ready to forgive him fully just yet, but she was willing to try. And that was enough for now. I think we're both learning, aren't we? She said, her voice softer now. Learning to trust again. In different ways. Liam smiled gently. I think we are. The next few weeks felt like a delicate dance, slow, thoughtful, and full of uncertainty. Emma continued to take small steps toward rebuilding her trust, letting go of the anger she had once felt and replacing it with a quiet understanding that forgiveness was a process, not a single event. She spent more time with Liam, slowly learning to appreciate him for who he was, both the man with the wealth and success and the man who had stood in front of her with raw honesty, acknowledging his mistakes. Liam, for his part, never rushed her. He was patient, attentive, and always present. He did things for her without expecting anything in return, whether it was bringing her favorite flowers after a long week or listening intently to her talk about her art projects. His gestures were never grandiose. They were simple, quiet affirmations that he cared about her and wanted to show it. One evening, as Emma sat at her art desk in her apartment, working on a new piece for a gallery show, Liam texted her, I was thinking about you today. About how I've taken so many things for granted, but I never took the chance to tell you how much you've meant to me from the very beginning. I'm so grateful to have you in my life. Emma smiled, her heart warming at the sincerity of his words. She was still processing, still figuring out the path forward, but she had learned something important. Trust could be rebuilt, love could grow again, and second chances were worth the risk. The next evening, Liam invited her to dinner at the same restaurant where they had first met, the place where everything had started. This time, however, there was no awkwardness between them. There was no tension or fear. There was just the quiet promise of something that had been restored, something worth fighting for. As they sat down at the same table where their blind date had gone awry, Liam reached across the table, taking Emma's hand in his. Grace, he began, his voice sincere and full of emotion. I know we've been through a lot. And I can't change the past. But what I can do is make sure our future is filled with honesty, love, and trust. I promise you, I will never lie to you again. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of your love. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, but this time, they were tears of hope, not pain. I believe you, she whispered. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the restaurant, Emma realized that she had finally found what she had been looking for, not in perfection, but in the honesty and love they had built, piece by piece. This story is about more than love, it's about authenticity, second chances, and how sometimes the truth, even when it's messy, can lead to something beautiful. Liam and Grace's journey reminds us all that vulnerability is a strength, and love is worth fighting for.